أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى وسلم على سيدنا محمد سيدنا وسندنا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا ومولانا صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذرياته وأهل بيته ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. وبعد. باب تحريم بيع الحاضر للبادي وتلقي الركبان أو تلقي الركبان والبيع بيع على بيع أخيه والخطبة على خطبته إلا أن يأذن أو يرد. This is a chapter regarding the prohibition of a sedentary person selling on behalf of a Bedouin, a nomad, and riders going out of the city to intercept goods before they reach the marketplace and trying to hijack a sale with another offer and trying to hijack someone's marriage proposal with another marriage proposal, except for if there is permission for that or if that proposal is rejected. And so the title I gave to the live stream, because this is two abwab that kind of are similar to one another, this one and the subsequent one, which we'll talk about subsequently. That's why it's subsequent, right? Is transactional ethics. So this comes down to an idea that is missing in the deen of a lot of people. And there are strata. It's missing in the deen of a lot of people, that we have this idea that somehow religiosity is just your ritual observation. Do you have a beard? Do you have a niqab, jilbab, niqab, kabab? What is it? You know, like those types of things, right? Which is kind of like how the Jews are. So the Jews will ask you, are you Shomer Shabbos? Do you observe the Sabbath? No, but I observe kosher. They kind of pick part of it. تُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْض. This is not acceptable. It's not that every Muslim, or really any Muslim, is successful in observing the entire religion, but we don't pick and choose, or when we fail at one thing, we don't say that, well, I'm trying to do this, I'm not trying to do that, or that I'm not trying to focus on that, or whatever. The idea is what? The haqq of Allah Ta'ala is taqullaha haqqa tuqatihi. It's that you fear Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala as He should be feared. His haqq is completely all enveloping. Udkhulu fi silmi kafatan wa la tattabi'u khutuwat ash-shaytan. It said, enter into submission completely, all of you, and don't follow the footfalls of shaitan. This is a very basic, I think it should be a very basic understanding of deen. But then what happens is, because of people's lack of ilm and their lack of knowledge or their heedlessness, they don't think about what deen means more than salat, more than fasting in Ramadan, more than perhaps, like I remember, you know, I don't know, like all sorts of incidents in my life. I don't want to say, because then it's going to become ethnic or nationalistic or this and that, and people will start, you know, using it as a way to like pick fights with one another. That's not really the reason for it. But somebody prays, and you know, and the other guy like eats halal, and the guy who prays doesn't eat halal, and the guy who's eating halal doesn't pray, and then they both look at each other, tell each other off, you know. And you know, uncles and aunties will be like, oh my God, you know, such and such woman, do you see how she dresses, and you know, how much she does this, she does that. And then I'll be like, yeah, well, at least she prays 5 times a day. Yeah, I know, but you know, that's still, I'm like, no, praying 5 times a day is actually a bigger deal than you know, the piece of cloth you have on your head, or whatever, as important as that may be, or as much as it may be mandated by the Sharia. The point is not to pick and choose. Faqahat tells you that some things are indeed more important than others, but the idea is that you don't pick and choose, that you try your best for all of it. Now, why do I mention heedlessness and lack of knowledge? Because of heedlessness, you don't remember, right? You don't remember what you're supposed to be trying. Heedlessness is what? For example, I fell asleep without setting my alarm for Fajr. It doesn't mean that I made the intention to miss Fajr, but what's the effect going to be? What's the result? I'm going to miss Fajr, right? A person is heedless of a thing. They don't even, you know, they may, I guess theoretically, if someone asked them, you know, did you set an alarm for Fajr? They'll be like, oh yeah, thanks for reminding me. I forgot. No, I didn't. Let me set it right now. But heedlessness, ghafla, makes a person not think about it. And this is induced also by shaitan and by other bad habits that we have. And then lack of knowledge is even worse than that, because lack of knowledge, if you don't know that it's farther to pray Fajr, which should be somewhat a stretch, but as an example, a theoretical example, if a person doesn't know that this is a right of Allah Ta'ala, that they have to wake up for Fajr, barring some sort of really overwhelming types of circumstances, then that person, even if you say, you ask them, did you set your alarm for Fajr? They'll say, well, what is that? I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that. And they'll actually fight back with you. They'll argue with you. Or they may not argue with you, but inside of their heart they may as well be, because they've rejected it inside the heart, and that rejection is much more important and profound and fundamental and much more mulzam, much more the liability of a person is much more intense because of that rejection than the rejection on the tongue. And so this is a problem because we don't know how to transact properly. The deen is what? It's ibadat, but it's also aqaid, it's also muamalat, your transactions, it's also your muasharat, your social relations you have with people, it's also your tasawwuf, your tazkiyah, the state that you keep inside of your heart. And all of these things, they're not separate. It's not like 5 different things, like you pick one drink and you pick one meat for your taco, and you pick one shell for your taco, and you pick, do you want black beans or whatever, refried beans. It's not like that. Those things are completely separable. In fact, all of these 5, they're connected with one another. If one of them is sinking, it's going to pull the other 4 down necessarily, no matter how much more relatively ascendant they may seem. And so transactional ethics are part of Islam. And one of the reasons people don't think about transactional ethics, one of the many reasons, because of their lack of knowledge, ignorance, because of ghafla, because of heedlessness, because it's just not that big of a deal for them. One of the reasons is that our people were colonized in many of the countries that they came from for so long that they have no longer, it's left their imagination the idea that Islam is supposed to give you some sort of guidance with regards to anything to do except for your personal ibadat, your personal acts of worship. Any sort of social obligation with regards to Islam, there's an incentive to forget about those aspects of deen. Why? Because if you mention them in public in some countries in the Muslim world, they'll kill you. If you mention them in some countries in public in the Muslim world, they'll put you in jail. If you mention them in some countries in the Muslim world, they'll get you fired from your job, or they'll take away some sort of contract, or they'll do something, they'll penalize you to the point where it makes it very difficult for a person to hold on to things. And if you travel in the Muslim world, all of this kind of zulm, it took on a number of different flavors. In the Indian subcontinent, we had the good fortune that someone from the outside who's obviously not a Muslim, they came and they said and did all this stuff, and then people fought against them, and some people resisted them, some people resented them but weren't able to resist, some people actually made friends with them, some people tried to be like them, some people supported them. But at any rate, it doesn't require some sort of big conceptual leap to understand what the score is. Whereas, for example, you have in countries where communism ruled, and not all the communisms were the same either. So, for example, in the Soviet Union, you have people until the dissolution of the Soviet Union never prayed Salat al-Jumu'ah before. So you see all these Uzbeks and Kyrgyz and things like that in Masjid Dar es-Salaam and in the area and different masajids and things like that. Many of them moved to Chicago. Why? Because they originally immigrated to different places, and now they want their kids to be able to learn, to memorize the Quran and to study Deen and things like that. They themselves, the parents who are putting their kids into the Hifz programs, they themselves grew up not having read the janazah of anybody who died before 1991, not having gone to Jumu'ah before 1991, because Red October was a long time ago, right? That was before World War II. It was between the world wars. They grew up without having heard a Jumu'ah khutbah before, forget about maktab, forget about the hifz of Quran and things like that. Whereas the communism was different. For example, in Bosnia, the masajid were there and people were kind of allowed to pray, but you would be completely disowned by the party, and if you were not a party member, then you would not be able to get a certain type of job. So the only people who would be able to keep some sort of semblance of religiosity were people who were like farmers, or people who lived in villages or very remote places. And so what they lacked in harshness from the centralization of the government and the kind of Stalinization of the government, they had to deal with in like wave after wave of ethnic cleansing. The genocides that happened in Bosnia in the last 100 years, there's at least 5 of them, like major ones that happened. We only think about one, but several of them actually happened back to back. What used to be a predominant population of Muslims in what's now Yugoslavia, it's just a sliver of what it used to be. And the Bosniaks are very tough people. That's one of the reasons they were able to hold on to it. Otherwise, the chief metropolis of Islam in what's now Yugoslavia was what? In Rumelia, all of the European side of the Ottoman territories is what? It's Belgrade. Belgrade was actually the forward capital of Sultan Suleiman Kanuni when he went on the march against Vienna. And he didn't lose, and he didn't give up the siege of Vienna because, like the Polish hussars inflicted some sort of staggering defeat on them. They definitely did have, the war was sijal, it was a war of attrition back and forth. But the reason he had to pull his armies back is what? Is because the Safavid state, the kind of fanatical Qizilbash extremist Shiite state in the east, basically attacked them while they were on their way to liberate Andalus from the overland route. Otherwise, that was a project, it was a foregone conclusion. 1492, Columbus, one of the reasons they funded his trip was because, the Christian kings of Europe were scared that we have to be able to run away somewhere if these guys stomp us out. So at any rate, coming back to what we're talking about, the transactional ethics, rather than allowing us ourselves to go too far on this, very interesting but still a tangent of a tangent, is that those people in the communism, they weren't able to learn these things. Obviously, the people in Soviet communism didn't even know how to pray, many of them, and those people in the city in Yugoslavia, they didn't learn how to pray, whereas those people who are in the countryside and things like that, then they may have known how to pray, but it's not like you're having these full-time madaris where they teach you how to transact and things like that. And so all of these things, they need to be learned. And a person who compromises in any of them, they're compromising the entire deen. It's just like a person who says, in a qualitative sense, perhaps not in emphasis, but in a qualitative sense, somebody who says, for example, that praying 5 times a day is not fard, or praying fajr is not fard, or praying, I'm going to only pray 2 rak'ahs of maghrib instead of 3. Any compromise in it is unacceptable. Like that, there is a foundation of mu'amalat. Anyone who says transacting riba is jaiz, mutlaqan, this is kufr, it's not acceptable. But nobody knows what the definition of riba is. They think it's bank interest. That's one of the forms of it, but it's not the definition of it. Transacting in gharar, in non-descript or non-specific things, this is also haram. But people don't even think about that. They're like, why is insurance haram? Everyone has insurance. First of all, just because everybody has something, it's not a proof that it's jaiz or not. Second of all, not everybody has insurance. Surely there's someone in the world that doesn't have insurance. Someone in the ummah doesn't have insurance. Just because people are doing something doesn't make it permissible or impermissible. It may affect the fatwa somehow or another, but the hukum it doesn't affect. The fatwa is affected by circumstance. The hukum is not affected by circumstance. I mean, if you go to Mars, if you go to another planet, if you go to another dimension, right, eating pork is still haram. The hukum is the hukum, the fatwa is the fatwa. That may change because of circumstance, but you have to understand the ahkam in order to build up to what the fatwa is for those people who are hyper-fixated with context and not at all concerned with content. And so this is part of what? It's a book on tasawwuf, but there are chapters then regarding how a person is supposed to transact, because the idea is that your spirituality is not spirituality at all if it's built on ill-gotten means. It's the first hadith of Jami' of Tirmidhi rahimahullah tabarak wa ta'ala. He says, لا يقبل الله صلاة بلا طهور ولا صدقة من غلول. Allah ta'ala doesn't accept a prayer that's performed without wudu. Although that's not exactly what the hadith says, without purification, so tayammum or whatever, right? Whatever the different types of tahara are. But for most people in America, it's just wudu. right? That Allah Ta'ala doesn't accept a prayer without purification, and He doesn't accept charity that's given from ill-gotten wealth. So if you want to be a Sufi, you have to think about what it is that you feed yourself with. Whether it's the thing that you're eating, that is it actually halal or not, or whether it's the money with which you buy that thing that you eat or drink or wear, whether the money is halal or not. The entire chain from its inception to your consumption, all of it has to be haram. And this is the way of the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Khaja Fudayl bin Iyāḍ rahimahullah tabarak wa ta'ala was a brigand. He was basically a robber. Basically, by force of arms, they used to take stuff. He was from a tribe of robbers. That's what he was born in. That's all he knew. But he was a Muslim, and he was a pious man as well. And so he just kind of did what he did for a while, as many of us did with our lives before Allah Ta'ala gave us hidayah to do something better, and may still yet give us hidayah to do something better than we're doing right now. And so what happened was they say that one caravan came from Baghdad and crossed his lands. This was, I don't know, did anyone listen online, if they listened or not, the Jummah khutbah from this Friday, right? The first excerpt from the Quran. It's not the entire ayah I read, but the first excerpt of from the Quran that I read in the khutbah. أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَمَا نَزَلَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ إِلَى آخِرِ الْآيَةِ. That they say that that this caravan left from Baghdad, and instead of hiring security, he said that there's no brigand that I'm afraid of except for Fudayl bin Iyāḍ. And they say that he is a pious man. So instead of hiring security, they hired they hired a Quran reciter to go in the front of the caravan and to recite. And so it so happened that when he got to that verse, he read that verse that has not time come to, for the believers, for their hearts to be humble in front of the remembrance of Allah Ta'ala and that which has come down from the haqq, and not to be like the people who came before them. And so much time passed that they became so bored with Allah's remembrance, they became so bored with the revelation that their hearts became hard. And this is... Sadly, this is the state that many people in the Ummah are in right now as well, that Islam that used to capture the attention and capture the imagination of the Muslims in the past now has become, to many people, an old and boring thing that's no longer interesting to them. But at any rate, once that reciter recited that verse, then when he was about to attack and he heard the verse, it overwhelmed him. And so that was the beginning of his tawbah and his conversion to the path of righteousness. And so they say that he actually went to the people he robbed over the years and either asked them forgiveness or tried to give them compensation or whatever. And it took years. It took a long time for that to happen. There's so many of the mashayikh that are like that. Abu Bakr al-Shibli, he's one of the great disciples of Junaid, rahimahullah tabarak wa ta'ala. He was the hajib, he was the chamberlain of the sultan. So basically, if you want to come and see the Khalifa, I apologize, not sultan, the Khalifa, if you want to see him, he's the guy in the front room. And so those people are notorious. I don't know if anyone's ever been to like a government office in the Muslim world or not, right? Oftentimes, the corrupt politicians will keep a corrupt front man because that way they keep their nails clean. They don't have to ask for the bribe or anything, right? But sometimes you have a good person in the office, but they just don't know what the front guy is doing. So he said, I wasn't that bad. It's not like he would ask for bribes or anything, but he just, people would have their court cases that they needed to have adjudicated, or their complaints that they needed to be, that it was their right to be have rectified in the court of the Khalifa, and someone would just annoy me, and I would just like push their file to the side, basically. So he said it took him years. He went back and apologized. He thought about all the people whose haqq he arrogated, and he went back and tried to make it right. Some people were very genuinely impressed with his conversion and his repentance, and they forgave him. Some people didn't. Some people, they really humiliated him. So, okay, pay me this because I lost this much money because of your thing, or I lost this property, or this happened to me, that happened to me, Show me that you're that you're actually sincere about this, or even forget about it. I don't care if you're sincere or not. I just want my money. But he put in the time, he put in the effort, he put in the energy. Then he showed up, as a pious dervish in the majlis of the sheikh. You can't just do this. That yesterday you were, smoking and coking and joking and toking and God knows what the hell you were doing yesterday. And people have hukuk against you. And then today, I'm gonna be pious. That's how the Christians do it. That's how the Christians 6 days a week, smoke them out of their holes, and 6 days a week, we're gonna this and that, and 6 days a week shoot people and kill people, rob them, destroy the competition, this, that, and the other thing, and then on Sunday, I'm redeemed. I'm redeemed now. Now I'm forgiven. Now I'm forgiven. Now everything is okay again. Now the guilt has gone away. The blame has gone away from me. While the other people are all still, coping with the fallout and the aftermath, the after effects of the ill that you did to them. That's not deen. If a person, and people, just like a person, for example, they'll say, I have like 20 years of prayers to make up. Do I have to make them up? However many years you have or not is irrelevant. The prayer is a haqq of Allah Ta'ala, get going. How am I going to make them up? One way at a time, same way you missed them. At least try. If you fall short, you can be like, Ya Allah, I tried. I didn't know. I tried. I didn't have enough life. I made tawbah. I really meant it. I just didn't have enough life to finish it. That's a far more legit thing to be able to say to Allah Ta'ala on the Day of Judgment than, oh no, I just gave up because it was too hard. Because at that point you didn't even try. It makes a person wonder how tawbah-y was the tawbah in the first place, right? Because the whole point of the tawbah is you have to actually regret what you did. And so this same thing has to do with your debts and obligations to other people as well. Sometimes a person thinks, oh my God, like I did so much zulm on someone, how am I ever going to be able to pay them back? It's better if you owe a person $100,000, right? And you only have $15 in your pocket, my advice is you give them the $15 here. Because that $15 even to have to pay back through the punishment of the hellfire is going to be so bitter it's not going to be worth it. The deal is to get it right now. And Allah Ta'ala makes a way. This is part, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. The person who fears Allah Ta'ala gives them an exit from their problems. Sometimes that $15, giving it and just trusting in Allah and asking from Allah Ta'ala is the thing that opens the door for the rest of it to be paid off. Whereas the person who sits at home, you may not, if you try to negotiate with someone for something, right? You may get it, you may not get it. But you get 0% of things you don't ask for in a negotiation. Not everybody in the world is your mother. Some people, even their mother isn't their mother anymore. I mean, what are you going to do, right? So a person should keep that in mind. And so understanding what the point of transactions are, what the point of the marketplace is, what the point of buying and selling is, this is also very important. Because the theory that underpins the marketplace in Islam is very different than the theory that underpins the marketplace in the United States of America. I just came back, alhamdulillah, I came back from New York today. New York is horrible. Literally, I feel like ill as long as I'm over there, and I feel so much better now that I'm back. And I said it in every single majlis that I was there, and I meant it. I said that this New York of yours, they say about like shaitan, right? Shaitan, Iblis, that he boasted, that there was not a hand's breadth, mawdi' shibrin in the heavens or the earth, except for I've made sajda to Allah Ta'ala in it. There's not a hand's breadth of this earth, at least this planet that we're on, except for the facade of New York hasn't made it worse. Orange guys from New York, rainbow guys are from New York, Goldman Sachs is from New York. All they may be making the weapons in like Virginia and in North Carolina or whatever, but the offices are in New York where the transactions get done. All of like the batil of the entire world is from there. And so I tell them, I go, look, and it's just like small groups of people, they just get together and do this. You guys can also get together and do something good as well. Don't sell yourself short. Your enemies are not some sort of Superman. They're also flesh and bone, just like you are. Flesh and blood, just like you are. So the point is that their concept of transaction is what? All of us want to ingratiate ourselves. So this is a type of game where we basically try to make fools of one another. It's a game, it's like a casino. Casino is what? It's like two parties are trying to make a fool out of one another, right? One party thinks they can win, the other party thinks that they can win. The house has its calculations. Usually the house is set up to win, right? Because that's why they're the house. And they're usually the more intelligent party, but every so often you have someone who can do something like count cards and things like that. Once they figure out that you know how to do it, they're gonna put a restraining order against you. You can't come anywhere near the place. But even that person only goes, to the table when they know that they can win. And so they're different people trying to make fools of one another, and the idea is it's a zero-sum game. There is a limited amount of resources in the world, and it's either I take it from you or you're going to take it from me. So let's try to settle that process in a way that's less brutish than like just killing each other, even though ultimately it always just comes down to that. That's why Eisenhower warned against the military-industrial complex. I mean, the guy himself is a military guy, right? He's a general. He was such a popular person. Both Democrats and Republicans said, please run on our behalf. He wasn't either. He wasn't either of them. But once they got an inkling that he wants to run for president, both said, please just run on our ticket. And it was like a very arbitrary thing that made him a Republican. Otherwise, he could have been either party. And one of the last things he warned about when he came out of office is that we spend so much money on everything having to do with the military, on the arms, the weapons, logistics, all this other stuff. All of these freakish monsters that have now turned into Lockheed Martin and turned into Raytheon and into Blackwater or Z or whatever the hell they call it nowadays, paying people, to install toilets in Iraq for $100,000 a crack or whatever. And he said that you have to put them in check because they're amassing so much wealth that they're going to now use that money in order to bring politicians into power that will start wars so that they can make money. In the old days, the war started first, and then the weapons, there weren't enough weapons for them to fight. Now there's too many weapons laying around. So the weapons manufacturers are the ones who incite the wars so that it works the other way. It's completely ass backwards. It's putting the cart in front of the horse. And so this is one of the many problems with having this model of a marketplace, or even this model of government for that matter. And so in Islam, you have to understand what is the basis of the marketplace, like theoretically speaking, philosophically speaking. What's the point of Allah Ta'ala making riba haram and making buying and selling permissible? It's literally a verse of the Quran that they say that buying and selling and riba, it's the same thing. They're both like financial transactions. وَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَا. But Allah Ta'ala made bay'ah. He made buying and selling permissible, and He made haram riba. Why? Because riba can only be one side cheating the other. There's no way that you can have some sort of mutually beneficial transaction there. Someone says, well, what are you talking about? If it wasn't for interest rates, no one would be able to afford a new home with the mortgage. I go, the only reason that sometimes what happens is that actually the person who's taking the mortgage ends up on top. Why? Because the money itself is all fake. The money itself has no intrinsic value. The money itself, it's a race between, you have to sit and think about like what the inflation rates are. It's like two ribas are basically competing against one another. And so the government wanted to, for the sake of stability and for the sake of, certain other economic incentives, they wanted to rig the riba in favor of the consumer to be not so much against them. And what has it done? Imagine, do you think if mortgages were not available, houses would be as expensive as they are right now? Absolutely not. Like the same houses, they would be just as nice, but they would not cost as much. And the proof for that is once the cost of borrowing money goes up, right, which is itself a very problematic sentence to even say, right? The cost of borrowing money, if it goes up, then it has a dampening effect on the prices of houses. Whereas when the cost of borrowing money goes down, then it accelerates the increase of the prices of houses. But the thing is, the house is still the same house. You know, one of the things, for example, gold, right? People buy, sell, transact in gold. Gold is like a finite amount of it in the earth, and I'm sure there's still a lot of gold that hasn't been discovered, but it's a rare element, and there's not really a whole lot of it. You could probably fit all the gold in the world within a medium-sized stadium, maybe like a community college, like basketball court or something like that. You should be able to fit all or most of it, if not in one, then in two maximum. But it's a very shockingly small amount of gold there is in the world. When I was in high school, how much was gold? It was like $200-something an ounce. How much is gold now? It's like 27 something. It's gone up from like 23 something like 6 months ago or whatever. If you look at it that way, actually inflation hasn't gone up all that much. Stuff is still pretty cheap, really. The dollar is worthless though. And because we think of everything in dollars, we think of GDP in dollars, it's like skewed because the benchmark you're like looking at the entire world, you know, based on relative to it is like a feather that's like flying around in the air. So, you know, I remember when I was in high school, if you wanted to get a meal from, you know, Taco Bell, there was no boycott or genocide in those days, and just don't order the beef, right? Because it's not halal. Just order like a bean burrito or whatever. It was like $3. You get like a drink and like a bean burrito and like this cinnamon twist. If you get that right now, it'll probably cost $7, $8, $9. Someone's like, oh my God, it's become 3 times as much. It should be 10 times as much. Really, in that sense, the inflation is really not all that bad. But the dollar is like broken through the floor. This is all bakwas. This is all complete nonsense. This is, again, 100 different shayateen. All of them are overseeing 100 different parts of the marketplace. Each and every one of them is not collaborating for the greater good. They're trying to make fools of one another. The idea, the theory of transaction in the Sharia is what? Is that I have something you need, you have something I need. Society, civilization is built on what? On specialization, on the division of labor. So necessarily not everybody is going to be the best carpenter, not everybody is going to be the best blacksmith, not everybody is going to be able to build a house the same as another person is going to be able to teach a lecture. It's very interesting how Allah Ta'ala has divided the arzaq amongst people. Some people, you know, I remember, for example, my father had hired some workers to basically build out some part of his house that was completely like stripped down, bare bones. They turned a garage into what's essentially a 2-bedroom and 1-bathroom suite. Maybe like a 700 square foot garage. They turned it into a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom suite, including bringing in the plumbing when there's no plumbing, because the garage, there's no plumbing in it, right? Including bringing the plumbing in. And they did such a beautiful job. And all of them are like, their crew, like 4 or 5 guys working on, they're all meth heads. And they did it for a pittance. They did it for so little money. And it's not like he was ripping. He's paid them more than they even agreed to. And he realized that these guys, once they get paid, they disappear. They disappear from the job for like 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, 7 days a week. And so the way that the job got done was my mother, Allah have mercy on her, she would cook food, cook lunch for them. And that was the only thing they had to eat. So essentially when they blew through all the money on meth, and I mean, we don't have a choice what they do with their money, right? They would eventually become hungry. They'd come back to work. Why? Because they know this is a place where you can eat. So imagine that. That's such a sheer and stark level of incompetence from certain points of view that boggles the mind, blows the mind. But if you were to ask somebody who like is looking down on them for that, which is kind of justifiable, Allah Ta'ala, alhamdulillah, He saved us from it and He tested them with it. I'm not saying I'm better than anybody, but I'm saying the state that Allah put me in right now is better than that state. You know, I can say that without looking down on them. Allah Ta'ala give them hidayah and all of us, ameen. If you asked me to cut a 2x4 straight, I couldn't do it if my life depended on it. And these guys literally, they built walls, plumbing, every single thing, tiles, roofing, all of these different skills that a person has to have, their trades, their things that have to be learned. They did it flawless, beautifully. If everybody had to do the same thing, or everybody had to do something from scratch, the whole world would just turn into garbage. We'd go back to like throwing rocks at one another in the jungle, right? I mean, it's not there's not really a whole lot that you can do without collaboration with one another. And so that's the whole idea with buying, selling, and trade, is that people benefit one another. That's why the sunnah, because the point is not really to go into it's to talk about the theory of transaction and how it's spiritually helpful to you. It's not necessarily to go into the details of the different madhahib of buying and selling, although people need to learn those things as well. But what I'll submit for people's consideration is that our model for transaction is superior. And this is the reason that the Muslim civilization was the ascendant civilization of its age, is because economically it was far more robust than anything else. All of Europe for centuries was locked in the feudal system, and every place in Europe that the Muslims, their feet touched the ground, they abolished the feudal system, and they basically all of these places became wildly wealthy. Palermo was just like a kind of like a second tier city in Sicily. It became the second most populous city during Muslim rule after Rome itself. Once the Crusaders conquered it back, it became a backwater. Again, I would use other words, but there's a lot of Sicilians in America, New York, Chicago, or whatever. I don't want to get shanked. And also, it's our city anyway. Why would we talk bad about our city? Inshallah, it's a little bit down, but it's not going to be out, inshallah. Bengali brothers are already getting it back off the ground as we speak. If you go there, you'll see. That's what it is. The same thing with Andalusia, the same thing with Rumelia. And it's important to understand, don't idealize Muslim civilization to the point that you think that nothing wrong ever happened. Stuff happened. That's, life is up and down. But don't confuse the failure of people to be able to resist overwhelming systematized violence with some sort of failure on an economic level or on an economic level or on a philosophical level or on an intellectual level. It's just there's a lot of people that are really obsessed with like weapons and killing people, and they plot about it day and night, and that's their zikr, and that's their salat, and that's their Ramadan, and that's their Eid Mubarak, and that's their Laylatul Qadr. That's everything to them. And that's one of the reasons that they go around saying that we're violent people. And now we see very plainly in front of our eyes who the actual violent people are. Anyhow, so this is the tamheed of the discussion. We start with the ahadith. عن أنس رضي الله تعالى عنه قال نهى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن يبيع حاضر لباد وإن كان أخاه لأبيه أو وأمه متفق عليه. Sayyidina Anas bin Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam forbade a sedentary person, a city person, from selling as an agent on behalf of a Bedouin, a nomad, even if it's his half-brother from his mother or from his father. Your half-brother is your sibling, right? He said that don't have the city people sell the goods of the Bedouins as an agent. Why? The things that come in from outside. What do Bedouins bring from the outside? Oftentimes it's like livestock, because you can't feed livestock easily inside of the city. This idea that you actually buy feed for animals, this is more of a new idea. The feed that you buy for animals is not healthy. It's expensive. It's not good. Much of it is just like najis actually. Chicken feed is what? It's like cornmeal, because we grow too much corn in America, and they mix it with like other dead chickens. I remember we pitched Hafsa certification to a chicken plant, and the chicken plant guy was telling us about their operation. He says, our quality chickens are such good quality that they prefer to buy our dead chickens to feed other chickens. I was like, that's kind of messed up, but yeah, okay, cool. It's like, we don't feed dead chickens. Ours is a high quality product. We don't, but like they buy ours to feed to other chickens. And this is another thing, right? The Sharia makes sense, right? You're not supposed to feed najis to the animals. They realize that the prions concentrate more and more and more and more the more the cycle of feeding a dead thing to another dead thing goes on. So with chickens, they're like, just feed the dead chickens that didn't eat dead chickens to the other chickens, but don't feed the dead chickens that were fed dead chickens themselves. So they're just trying, which is madness as far as I'm concerned, but whatever. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, this is almost all the machine slaughtered chicken out there is like this, and some of the hand slaughtered chicken out there is like this, although a lot of it is vegetarian fed as well, mashallah. There are other reasons that the halal chicken is more expensive than the stuff in the grocery store. Much of the time it's a little bit higher quality as well. It doesn't explain the entire price discrepancy, but it does explain some of it, just to know. But the point is that what? Is that in pre-modern times, livestock, you kept them out in the field. They would be grazing. And so a Bedouin who's going to come and sell in the marketplace, what is he going to sell? He's going to sell like livestock. Or he's going to sell milk, or he's going to sell some sort of derivative of some sort of dairy product. These are all very basic and necessary things for life. You know, they're food products. They kind of, like without having a steady flow of these things coming into the city, what happens is that people cannot afford to eat and drink. People starve. People go hungry. And so the idea with this prohibition is what? Is when a Bedouin comes to the city. He's not comfortable over there. It's not his home. Bedouins cannot stay in the city for too long. Their immune systems are actually, in some sense, in some ways, they're weaker than the people in the city, because the concentration of people in the city means the diseases concentrate in the city. And the water is not as clean inside of the city. The air is not as clean inside the city. They don't like staying there for too long. And also then things are really expensive. It's like when somebody, like Miskin from like Lombard goes to like Manhattan, you can end up blowing a lot of money very quickly because it's very expensive, especially if you don't know your way around or what to do. So you just go and do your business and leave. And so this is one thing. The second thing is that the person who is the hadari, the city person who's selling on their behalf, he's going to then store the things that are to be sold. He's going to then mark the price up. He's going to be sophisticated in the way he transacts, right? Instead of selling 300 sheep at once, he's going to sell like one every day for the next 300 days or something like that, which impedes the flow of those vital things into the marketplace and ends up making everything more expensive. And so, and then what happens is that, the Bedouin, for example, now he has to leave and then he has to come back and then get the money because the money's not there up front, right? He has to wait now for 300 days to get his cut. And what ends up happening is that maybe he might not get it back. It causes problems all around. Whereas if you just let the Bedouin go, it's not like anyone can force him to sell his products for a price that he doesn't want. If he doesn't get the price he wants, he has full right to pick up his flock and go back out to the Badia. But the transaction here is beneficial for the Bedouin, who's the producer, and for the consumer. You cut the middleman out that's not offering a whole lot of value. And this is one theme that we'll discuss. We'll read through the rest of the hadith. وعن ابن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تتلقوا السلعة حتى يهبط بها إلى الأسواق متفق عليه. This is a similar mas'ala, although it's not exactly the same. That Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, he said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, don't go out of the city and like intercept the goods, the merchandise of people. Rather, let it enter into the city and then find a place in the marketplace to be bought and sold, and then let the negotiations begin there. So what would happen is, there's a caravan coming with something or another, and if, for example, you need, I don't know, a dozen eggs, right? The shipment of eggs is coming in, or you need new clothes for the winter, and the clothes, we live in like Bhutan, and the good clothes are made in Bangladesh, and so the caravan's coming from whatever Sylhet into our direction, and so you need a winter coat. Or whatever. You as a normal person can't just go like 50 miles out of the city to go and intercept and bid for a winter coat, because you don't even know when the caravan is going to arrive. At best, you'll have some sort of like a vague idea, right? Whereas someone who's already wealthy, somebody who has a lot of workers or slaves or a big family or whatever, they can actually have someone go post out over there, intercept the goods, buy them, and then hold them or jack up the price. And they're not doing anything for anyone, are they? because they're not the people who made the coats, and they're not the people who are going to use the coats. They just leverage somehow their wealth or their power or their advantages in a way to ingratiate themselves, but it's not really doing anything for anyone in general. So the Prophet ﷺ forbade that. He said, if a caravan is coming in, let them come, take their place in the marketplace, and then let a fair transaction happen. So the producers or the people who transported the goods from the place that they were into the place that they are, thereby taking a risk, so the people who are actually benefiting society in general and the process of all of these things happening, they're the ones who get the greatest amount of benefit, rather than the powerful or the rich just unusefully and unhelpfully leveraging their power in order to not really add any value to anything. There's an interest in the person who's a manufacturer of a good product getting paid more. There's an interest in the consumer who's buying that product in getting the product cheaper or having it more available. If you don't pay the manufacturer enough, what are they going to not do anymore? So they're going to not manufacture the thing anymore. It's not going to be in the marketplace. If the buyer no longer is able to buy, then what happens? Again, the manufacturers will not manufacture anymore. Why? Because there's nobody to buy their product. But if the weird intercept middleman guy stops intercept middlemanning, not only will no harm come, it'll actually make stuff better. But again, these are two similar. They're two similar masail. One is getting an unfair advantage on the goods that the Bedouins bring in, and the other is getting an unfair advantage on the goods that are coming in from outside of the city by intercepting the caravan. This issue is an issue that plagues the Muslim world. Sadly, in most of the Arab countries, not to pick on our ikhwa al-Arab, mashallah, that we love for the love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, mashallah. But this isn't. It's not because they're Arabs that this happens. But sadly, this is a condition that the Arab countries are suffering in general. Maybe Mauritania is like an exception to this. I don't know of any other exception other than maybe Mauritania and like Chad that are exceptions to this rule. Chad is part of the Arab League as well. What happens is that all of the business licenses, all the mercantile activities that are your God-given right to buy and sell, all of them are restricted by government licenses, and those licenses are then given as favors to the khawas of the ruler. That whoever the ruler is, whether he's a king or an emir or a sultan or prince or prime minister or whatever president, whoever he is, whatever he is, right? It's just given to his lackeys. And then they divide them down lower and lower. Sometimes they'll sell the licenses on and whatever, and nobody else has even the right to come in and transact. Not a person who's like selling something on the street side, all the way up to to who controls or who's able to offer you like cell phone service or whatever. And yes, there are obviously some sanctioned interests of the public that exist, that say that you have to control who transacts in certain things. Like, you don't want to have just any nutcase set up their own cell phone service or whatever. There are certain problems that could happen with it, but the idea is it should be open to anybody who's able to do it properly and do it well. Or there should be some sort of fairness, at least in the way, if there's like a limited marketplace that will get crowded, there should be some sort of fairness in how those licenses are given out. There's absolutely no fairness whatsoever, 100% nepotism. If you want to do any work in the Khalij, right? What happens is there's a prince who has the right to do that, and then the prince has a Lebanese guy who buys that from him, and the Lebanese guy sells it to a Syrian, and then the Syrian sells it to an Iraqi, and then the Iraqi sells it to an Egyptian sells it to Pakistani sells it to the Bangladeshi. By the time it goes down their weird racial caste system, the guy in the bottom is doing the work for like 7 cents on the dollar. And they oftentimes don't even get paid all 7 cents. The workers don't get paid anything oftentimes. And it's a completely ass-backward system. It's a system makes no sense whatsoever. If the point of the economy was to ingratiate people without doing any work, then it makes a lot of sense, which kind of, that's the point of those economies. The point of the economy in Islam is what? Is that it's these transactions should be of mutual benefit to to the person who's the producer, the person who's the consumer, and to the public in general, and that's not happening. And so same thing, because we ragged on the Arabs for a while, so let's rag on the Desis as well. One of the reasons that, for example, in Pakistan, that farmers are so poor is that they have no cold storage facilities to store their produce. It goes bad very quickly. And all the middlemen are, again, they're these types of kind of like nepotistic or corrupt people who sit on these wholesale markets, and people have to sell what they sell for whatever the wholesale market rate is. And it's a completely messed up system. The government should provide the farmers some sort of infrastructure by which they can bring their really superior goods to market, right? Pakistan has superior level agriculture. Pakistani fruits, vegetables, things like that, they go proliferate in the Khalij and parts of Europe for the people who can buy them and store them and transport them properly. When it comes to dates, for example, they grow dates in Balochistan. Literally, Iranian smugglers buy all of those dates, send them to Iran, they package them, and they sell them back in Pakistan for like 10 times, 15 times the price. Why? Because the middlemen inside the country completely have hijacked the entire agricultural system. They're the ones who make everything like 10 times the price when Ramadan, like 3 days before Ramadan starts, and then the prices become normal again, like 3-4 weeks after Eid. And they add absolutely no value to anything. And so it's a problem. In India, you remember there was the farmer protest in India that happened like during lockdown? That was exactly what it is. India has kind of a more like in the direction of communism type of sensibility in the government, or at least they did until this recent kind of nationalistic type of fervor that swept up the country over the last 20 years or so. And so they have a scheme by which the government provides or promises a basic minimum price that they'll give for certain types of staple crops, important crops, so the farmers keep growing them and they can be guaranteed that they're not going to get ripped off or sold at a loss by these unscrupulous wholesalers that are there in India as well. And it's actually a very low price. But because these wholesalers are so unscrupulous, it helps them to stay in business, stay alive. Because sometimes they can really get ripped off. A farmer can be doing good for 10 years, one crop fails, and they're completely wiped out. And so what happens is that they said, oh, we're going to modify that system. We're not going to keep that system as it is anymore. The farmers said no. They literally choked the capital city from every direction and brought business in Delhi to a grinding halt over that. And it's not really all that great of a solution, but it's much better than the thing that we have in Pakistan. Anyhow, all of it is really horrible. We have things like that in America as well. Imagine 20 years ago, if you wanted it, did anyone ever take a taxi in their life? I've taken a taxi like 3 times in my life. It's a completely foul system. You have to get something called a medallion. It's some piece of metal that they weld to the engine. It costs, depending on where you are, $100,000, $500,000, $250,000, $1 million if you're in New York City. The medallion is just what? It's not even the license to operate a taxi, but it's just some stupid thing that the car has to have in order for you to be able to now apply to be in the taxi system. Uber, which is by no means a perfect company, and in many ways, if people want to complain about Uber, we can have a big session about their complaints about Uber. They just circumvented the stupid medallion system, and look, the entire transportation system imploded. And it wasn't any sort of conceptual jump. All it was what? This kind of weird, unnecessary government monopoly that circumvented it, and look what happened to the economy. It opened up entire branches of the economy. Between that, grocery delivery, medicine delivery, food delivery. Now, mashallah, middle-class people like myself and Bhai Talha are going to go broke because our wives are going to order Uber Eats. And we're going to be like, oh, for God's sake, this just costs $40 to buy 2 hamburgers. We could have just driven 5 miles and get normal, bankrupted by eating out instead of double bank. But the point is it works because the economics makes some sort of sense, versus before there was an intermediary between the consumer and between the provider that completely added no real value to anything. And once you remove it, you see everything flourishes, it blooms. And so that's the theory behind these two. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his hadith will mention them, and then he'll mention some other things as well. عن عبد الله بن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تتلقوا الركبان ولا يبيع حاضر لباد فقال له الطاووس ما لا يبيع حاضر لباد قال لا يكون له سمسارا متفق عليه. So Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu ta'ala who said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, don't let the riders go out and like intercept the caravan. I feel like it's, Abdullah, there's something wrong with the thermostat. Can you see what the thermostat is at right now? He said that let not the riders go out and intercept caravans, and let not a city person, urbanite, sell on behalf of a. Yeah, turn it down, please, and just turn it off. Let not a sedentary person sell on behalf of a nomad. Tawus, who is one of the great imams of the Aslaf, of the Tabi'een, and a great student of Ibn Abbas, right? What does Tawus mean? Tawus means peacock. This is probably a good-looking dude, mashallah. Imam, I should say, astaghfirullah. Should not lose adab for the great ones, except for what I'll say is that I didn't mean it to lack adab, rather I meant familiarity, but khair, inshallah. We should be more careful with the way we say things. So Tawus is saying, like, what does it mean for a sedentary person sell on behalf of a nomad? He says he shouldn't be a simsar, like an intermediary or an agent. Or, you know, like you have like real estate agents and like things like that, right? That's the word in classical Arabic, is that simsar, that the Bedouins are not selling any sort of thing that requires an agent, an intermediary. Let them just go to the marketplace and sell their things themselves. وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال نهى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن يبيع حاضر لباد ولا تناجشوا ولا يبيع الرجل على بيع أخيه ولا يخطب على خطبة أخيه ولا تسأل المرأة طلاق أختها لتكفأ ما في إنائها. وفي رواية قال نهى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن التلقي وأن يبتاع المهاجر للأعرابي وأن يشترط المرأة طلاق أختها وأن يستعمل الرجل على صوم أخيه ونهى عن النجش والتسرية. So this is again a very interesting hadith in which a number of transactional issues are mentioned. Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam forbade that a city person, a sedentary person, should sell on behalf of a nomad. We covered that. وَلَا تَنَاجَشُوا. Don't fake bid up prices. Like imagine there's the tanajush is the one meaning is that what? Is that you there's like an auction and you have someone as a plant to like, because they know someone else wants it, they can see someone else wants the product, so they just kind of fake bid him up until, you know, they feel like that person will, you know, keep bidding higher and higher, and then when they start seeing reluctance in them for them to bid higher, then they stop. Why? Because they were going to give a certain price for it, you're not going to give that price. You're just artificially inflating the price, making an artificial type of competition where that really doesn't exist. Let them have it for the price they're paying. There's really nobody else who is going to outbid them. Another meaning of tanajush that's suggested in the commentaries is to talk a product up as if it's better than it really is. Okay? Honda Civic is an awesome car. Oh my God, it's like the best experience of my life. This, that. Okay, so it's an okay car, right? But like just a, you know, it's like it was just like riding a Tesla, and like it's just amazing. And you know, the navigation, you just put the thing in and it'll tell you exactly where you're going and how many minutes to get there. And you mean you're artificially talking the thing up in order to make it seem better than it really is. Don't do it, it's haram. A lot of people do it. They say everybody else does it. If we don't do it, no one's going to buy our things. This is a problem. If you want to deal with this problem, then let's look back to previous lessons. And the Hamzian maxim of why it's so bad for someone once they take a piss in the cooler, they wonder why nobody else wants to drink. It ruins it for everybody. It's not right. You should have a muhtasib in the marketplace that takes people to task for these types of things. They even do that in America as well. Like if you advertise a thing in grossly in a wrong way, you could get sued for that. You should be able to get sued for that. Guess where they learned that from? وَلَا تَنَاجَشُوا and وَلَا يَبِعْ الرَّجُلُ عَلَى بَيْءِ أَخِيهِ. If your brother is making a sale, don't try to intervene with your own sale. So two people, Wasim is selling a heater to Zaid. He's an HVAC guy, right? Ahmed just got into the HVAC system, you know. He's like, oh, I'll sell you the same heater for like, 10% less. Or I'll sell you a better heater for the same price. No, if the two of them are engaged in a transaction, wait for it to come to a conclusion. If the sale is done, then that was their risk. And if the sale isn't done, then after they say no, or they fail to agree and explicitly end the negotiation, then you can make your offer. This is another problem. People undercut one another. And it's totally haram. It's like it's a way of making the money. You're like, well, it's not interest. I'm buying and selling things, and it's not a haram thing. And whatever. This is a way you make your rizq haram, by doing stuff like this. And let not a person propose marriage over the proposal of his brother. And so this is now overlap from mu'amalat to mu'asharat. Somebody proposed to a woman, you found out about it. But if you really wanted to propose that badly, you should have talked to her before yourself. And this is another thing, this happens, it's a weird thing happens inside of the hearts of people. They realize how much they love one another once they're about to like miss out, And that's a human thing. That's a different thing than whether you love that person or not. And so you're not going to propose marriage to that. You're going to propose marriage to a real person. And maybe the other person actually proposed because it was some sort of genuine feeling. That don't try to mess it up. Yes, if she says no, then once that's done, again, just like in the business transaction, once that negotiation has failed, it's died, then you can go and say what you need to say. But interestingly enough, again, human nature. I went to one Mufti Sahib, a friend of mine, mashallah, his two sons that were very similar, less than a year apart in age. While we were talking to one another about some our fiqh issue, the kids started yelling and they came to fight. They came to blows. They started, hitting each other and like just going at it, right? Two sons, like 6 and 7 or something like that, real mature age. So they're fisticuffsing it up, and then finally their father's like, stop, what are you doing? And this toy they were fighting over, he's like, you actually have exactly the same toy. And he just reaches over it. I swear to God, the exact identical thing. And he gives it to him. So both of them have the toy in their hand. They look at each other. They look at the thing. They look at each other. And they just both put their toys down and like run off and start doing something else. Because all of a sudden they didn't want it anymore because, So it's kind of, you also, if a person is thinking about it, don't think about it. Because maybe once that negotiation is done, you'll yourself realize, well, maybe I didn't love her all that much. So it's part of human nature. So the transaction shouldn't, the madar of the transaction shouldn't be that. It should be the actual thing that you're transacting in. The madar of the khitbah, the marriage and engagement shouldn't be, FOMO or competing with other people. It should be whether you think this is really a good match or not. If not, mashallah, this is something I tell young men who sadly lack a little bit of courage nowadays. Not all of them, but some of them, many of them, more than in the past maybe. But hey, if you want to marry somebody, just go ask her to marry her. What if she says no? Well, what if she says no? It happens. You didn't do anything indecent, did you? You didn't do something wrong. You didn't rob a bank. You didn't curb stomp a puppy. You didn't expose yourself in public. People walking by or something just indecent and embarrassing like that. You wanted to get married. She said no. You would be surprised. She'll actually respect you for it. She might actually even say yes when she sees that you have this much jur'at, like this much courage, and like you're that brazen that you can do it. That may actually make her look at you differently. But even if she says no, even if she mocks you, even if she whatever, that's her problem. You didn't do anything wrong, did you? No, you just asked for something. It didn't happen. It didn't work out. And so the same thing here as well. So he says that don't try to over hit somebody's khitbah. This applies to so many things. But the sad thing I see even now, imams, masjid imams, they'll try to cheat each other out for a job. They'll hear someone is interviewing in this place, and they'll call and they'll know that there's already something going on. It's not like open, we're soliciting whatever. No, they'll know somebody's like closing the deal, and they'll call and do this and that and the other thing. I know one of my colleagues. I know him. I don't even think he knew this happened. I actually was hired for an imam job. The masjid president told me that brother, his father called and said, no, don't hire him, hire so-and-so instead. Masjid president, I told him off. I said, don't tell me all of this crap. I go, you guys are our enemies. I go, who is an imam like that he'll try to like make enmity between two people in general, in particular imams and masajid, right? But I don't think he knew. I think his father was just like, too I don't know, unaware of the Sharia maybe, I don't know. But these things happen, and they're just as haram. Something just as dumb, you would be surprised. Alibaba, Al-Quds shawarma stand, falafel stand. How come you got their halal certification and not ours? These are stupid things. Only stupid people do these types of things. Allah Ta'ala is not pleased with any of it. If it's bad for you getting your dunya, imagine how horrible it is for you when you're doing something ostensibly for the sake of Allah Ta'ala. You're trying to recruit murids for your cult versus someone else's cult. You're trying to recruit students for your madrasa versus someone else's. Let it go. Why? Like, you're in the wrong business if these feelings come to you, and it doesn't. Things come to a person because a person is a person. But if you really struggle with them, you're probably in the wrong business. I say this because there are students of knowledge here in the room. And trust me, the fasad of the ummah starts with the fasad of the ulama. In the Jummah khutbah, I would not say this. Because the awam already, they have a problem that they don't give the requisite respect to the people of knowledge. But because the people in this gathering are mostly students of knowledge and nobody listens to me, if someone's going to listen, they're going to listen to like whatever famous fulan instead, talk about like, cry about like that one time that he, once saw a puppy like get injured or whatever, and it's going to go viral and they'll be like, oh, alhamdulillah, mashallah, that's my imam. So the people who are going to listen to this maybe have a little bit more of a milan towards studying deen. Don't do this. Please, for the sake of the Lord, don't do it. It's wrong, even if you see your sheikh do it, even if you see your teacher do it. Even if you see me and when you see me do it, it's still wrong. Don't do it. It's easy for me to say now because I'm not like personally like stuck in a thing, right? But everybody, there's a fitna and a test for everybody. Some person money may mean nothing to them, but with a beautiful face walks by, their entire compass like starts to spin. There may be a person that means nothing to them, but power or fame means something to them. And some people are tested by everything, and some people, Allah protected them from things that they're tested by nothing. Don't go down that path. It's not a good path. And then finally, he says something which is worth hearing. And if people don't like it, then that's, they need to check themselves. He says that, and let not a woman make a condition of the talaq of her sister so that she can spill her cup out. Meaning what? A man comes and takes a marriage proposal to a woman and he's already married. That woman, he forbade her from saying, I'll accept I'll accept your proposal on the condition that you divorce your wife. لِتَكْفَأَ مَا فِي إِنَائِهَا, so that he can spill out what's in her cup. Meaning Allah gave her a blessing, which is she has a husband. First of all, this is one of those things we have to go to Dars. In Islam, having a husband is a good thing. It's a blessing. It's not the patriarchy, it's not zulm, it's not slavery, it's not evil, it's not Jahannam, it's not any of that stuff. It's a blessing, right? And the second thing is what? If a man proposes marriage to her, if she wants to marry him, she can marry him. If she doesn't want to marry him, she doesn't have to marry him. She's not a homewrecker if she accepts his proposal. But if she says, but it's not right for her to, it's not permissible for her to say, I'll marry you, but you divorce your husband. Now it puts the man in a situation where he obviously, proposed marriage. He didn't propose marriage to her because he's indifferent. He proposed marriage to her because ostensibly he has some sort of desire and some sort of longing and some sort of attraction to her. Now he can basically either get what he wants, or he can, he can get what he wants by harming another person, or he can not harm another person, but then like have to feel the bitterness about that, right? And so that's his issue. That's a separate issue that should be discussed. I'm not just saying I'm not absolving a man from all of his responsibilities, nor is the Prophet ﷺ. However, this is because the woman is going to be asked for her account, he's going to be asked for his account. For the woman, 100% scumbag move on her part. It's not like fashionable or polite to, for a man to call a woman a scumbag, but I'm trying to, because if I use something that's more normally used, gender-specific description of people of not the best character in the world, then that's going to sound really misogynistic. So let's just stick with scumbag right now. 100% scumbag move on her part, which is what? If she wants to marry him, say yes. If you don't want to marry him, just say no. And if the fact that he's married is why you don't want to marry him, then say no. But why would you carve a path out, that zero-sum path? Again, this is the philosophy. This is why we took so long in the beginning talking about the philosophy that undergirds all of these things, or some of it, which is what? It should be, transactions should be what? Win-win. They should not be zero-sum, that either you win and I lose, or I win and you lose, and we're all just trying to make a fool out of one another. So don't say that. Don't say that. If you don't want to marry him, if he's already married to another woman, and that's the reason, or for any other reason you don't want to marry him, then just say, I'm honored that you offered. I don't think that I can, accept your offer at this time. May Allah Ta'ala find you something better. Please don't call my father again. But Jazakumullah khair. But I really mean it. Don't call my father again. That's it. Done. Don't call me again about this. I mean it, but I also mean the du'as for you. Just be polite about it and say no. This idea of what, like what the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, that why do you have to knock her cup over and spill out whatever is in it, whatever blessing she has? Why do you have to take a crack at it? I can tell that a lot of people would probably not be excited about this and be triggered for so many different reasons, but there also is a reason that they're not here right now. And we praise the Lord for giving us the tawfiq to hear the Mubarak Kalam of the Prophet ﷺ and benefit from it. وَفِي رِوَايَةٍ, in another narration, he said, radiyallahu anhu, that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ prohibited going out to intercept goods, and that a muhajir should sell on behalf of Arabi, but the maqsid is the same, that the sedentary person, city person, should sell on behalf of the Bedouin, and that he forbade that a woman should condition her accepting a marriage proposal on the divorce of her sister, meaning on the divorce of the wife that he's currently married to. وَأَنْ يَسْتَامَ الرَّجُلُ عَلَى السَّوْمِ أَخِيهِ, and that you should make an offer over the offer, the currently being entertained offer of your brother in a business transaction. وَنَهَى عَنِ النَّجَشِ, and he also prohibited najash, which is to artificially upbid an auction. What tasriya? What is tasriya? Tasriya is that someone should sell an animal that gives milk, a dairy animal, and purposely not milk the animal for long enough that the udders start to look like they're bigger than they are, to give the false impression that this animal produces more milk than it actually produces. Rather, milk the animal normally, sell it normally, so the person can know what it is that they're buying, rather than having to have this guess. Again, this second model of the transaction, which is two parties trying to make a fool out of one another, or trying to zero-sum get a leg up on one another. There are only two more hadith. I know we've gone over, but I want to finish the bab. At least I was hoping to finish both babs, but perhaps today's dars became excessively verbose, and I ask Allah for forgiveness and for you for forgiveness as well. وعن ابن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا يبيع بعضكم على بيع بعض ولا يخطب على خطبة أخيه إلا أن يأذن له متفق عليه وهذا لفظ مسلم. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in a hadith narrated by Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, let not some of you try to sell over the heads or over the offers of others, meaning if there's an offer in process, let it come to its conclusion. Then afterward, you can try a new transaction, and let not one propose marriage over the marriage of his brother, unless he gives him permission. If he says it's okay if you want to or whatever, she should know which of the two of us she wants. Like, there's a reason that might be okay, right? Imagine maybe she was considering marrying that other person, and the person wants to know that is she really done with him or not. I don't know. A number of reasons might be there. If he gives permission, then the permission can be taken. This is again permission with taradi, right? That person actually is sincerely giving the permission, not just that you put them in an awkward position, or you like pressured them and like out of embarrassment they said yes. No, but out of their genuineness of their heart, if they give permission, then it's permissible. And finally, when Uqbata ibn Amir radiyallahu ta'ala anhu anna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam qala al-mu'minu akhul mu'mini فلا يحل للمؤمن أن يبتاع على بيع أخيه ولا يخطب على خطبة أخيه حتى يذر. Rawahu Muslim. Uqbat ibn Amir radiyallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that the believer is the brother of the believer. Why brother mentioned is you look out for each other, right? This is another cultural explanation needed. There's a time when people used to look out for brothers, used to look out for one another. MashaAllah, you guys are good brothers. MashaAllah, you look out for each other. But the other people, sometimes we're a little too much sibling rivalry, or worse than that, indifference. So you're brothers with one another. You should see your common success not in what your company gives you or what the government gives you, but in how your family, that you look out for one another. If one of you is successful, it couldn't go wrong for anybody else, right? So it said that the believer is the brother of the believer. It's not permissible for him to try to get a sale over the sale of his believer, nor for him to propose marriage over the proposal of his brother, hatta yadara, until he gives up hope and leaves the prospect. I mean, she says no, and he accepts it, and it's done. There's no more reasonable way forward for him. Then afterward, if a person wants to propose marriage, they can do so. وصلى الله تعالى على رسوله سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. In the taking the advice of Bhai Jawad, inshallah, we'll have question and answer on the live stream. And then if someone has something that they don't want to say on the live stream, or wants to take it easy on me and has some question that the feds are you're gonna give them an easier time building a case or whatever against you, not me. I'm not doing anything. I never do anything wrong. Alhamdulillah, I'm squeaky clean. Oops, 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 right? But just do yourself a favor, then wait till the live stream's over. Go ahead. Any questions? Sisters, any questions? Yeah.
Seems like the model of a lot of business nowadays is that the goal is to move money, meaning that you buy something at a cheaper price and you sell it at a higher price.
Uh-huh.
So does that fall under this idea of being that middleman that gives value to the
So the question is, that's a lot of business. The model now is to move money or wealth around, to buy cheap and sell high. Sometimes when buying cheap and selling high, there's a benefit in that. It's not just buying cheap or selling high for no reason. That the terminal buyer and the producer can easily transact with one another, except for you're preventing that. That's the model that's problematic. But for example, if we wanted to buy durian from Malaysia, right? And you buy it over there, a cargo load of it, a plane load full of it, for God knows, like whatever, 20 ringgits a kilo. And I'm sure it's more expensive than that actually, but 20 ringgits a kilo, and you come over here and sell it for $20 a kilo. You're solving a problem, because if I wanted the durian, I could go buy it for 20 ringgits a kilo. I just have to go all the way to Malaysia, right? So you're solving a problem of mine. So in that sense, buying low and selling high isn't the problem. The problem is, are you actually adding any value to any of the chain? There's the person who adds value, there's a person who adds no value. And then there are people who then put in harm, so they monopolize things. And certain monopolies are definitely, most monopolies are haram in the Sharia, and they make no sense. Theodore Roosevelt, who was, Not that it's my decision, but if I were to roll the dice and have to, like, you know, take a guess, probably think he's going to Jahannam because he did a lot of bad stuff. But one of the good things he did for this country, which is the reason that I really don't like what the word progressive means now, because he was the original progressive. One of the great things he did for the people of his qawm, even though he wasn't nice to others, is that he was the one who introduced like legislation to bust up monopolies. Because monopolies, if you look at the economics of America between the world wars and before, you know, after the Civil War, before World War I, it was rife. The entire marketplace was just this kind of bakwas. Things, really, really rich people leveraging their wealth in order to, like, you know, capture monopolies and force people to transact in ways that are just completely nonsense because of their wielding their wealth in order to gain abnormal advantages over people. And, you know, like Uber is an abnormal advantage. Billions of dollars invested in it. It's not like I can start my own Uber app and you start your own Uber app and compete, right? But at least there's someone who can make an argument that some people are benefiting from it. Whereas like the dudes like the robber barons who are the big magnates of that era, really they didn't really do all that much for anyone except for themselves. And they caused just a momentous amount of harm. That's why unions come out of that era. That's why the antitrust legislation, trust meaning is a synonym for monopoly in that context, that legislation came out. And you know, that's why also, you know, if you're a real patriotic American, you should like, really distrust these big corporations. You should not be happy about it. It's not right. Yes.
So you mentioned a lot about, like, from the side of, like, the sellers, right, that really take advantage. So the person, for example, going to meet, like, a caravan.
Yeah.
You know, so on the flip side, what if you have situations where, like, here you have workers' unions, right, that they impose, like, we're going to negotiate on behalf of a bunch of workers.
Yeah.
And then what ends up happening is, I mean, I'm seeing a lot today, like, a lot of American companies go out to offshore a lot of jobs.
Sure.
Because of, obviously, it's going to be cheaper labor, etc. So is there anything from a Saudi perspective that can mitigate this? Because what ends up happening is these corporations take severe advantage of, like, you know, people in Africa or India, etc. So, like, what's in a perfect world?
So yeah, you're talking about the idea of like managing the relationship between labor and between companies such that the jobs stay at home and don't get all offshored overseas, where they can actually take really bad advantage of the workers and things like that. And then there's some arguments to be made. There's some people in America that don't like unions because they say they drive too hard of a bargain, and so some states have like right to work legislation. I kind of am a commie in that sense. I roll my eyes at that. I think all of that is just rich people trying to get richer, but that's because I'm broke. If I was rich, maybe I could see that how I see that they have kind of a point, because unions can, I guess, possibly demand things that are unrealistic. But even then, it's like, it's not black and white. Part of the reason the boss is the boss and the worker is that the boss has to deal with, like, you know, see that? Black Republicans right here. High five, brother, mashallah. I'm not going to turn the camera around, but mashallah right there, right? You know, we're not a monolith. We're royally pissed, mashallah. The issue is this, is that, like, you know, just because you make a lot of money at certain times doesn't mean that it's always like that. And you actually have to have an excess in order to regularize the curve for the times that you're not making as much money. You know, it's all complicated. What I'll say, because I can't solve all these problems right away, and possibly at all. But I'd like to think I can if I was given a shot. But for right now, maybe not be the time to give like a really super in-depth treatment for something like this deserves. But what I would say is that, you know, the government has the right to intervene in things when the common good it requires it. So, for example, does the government have a right to, you know, ensure that every one of the citizens of the Khilafah says Ameen out loud? No. Or says it quietly, for that matter, like if I was Sultan? No. Why? Because there's no common interest in it. It's like between a person and Allah Ta'ala, you're trying to take dakhal in something that's not really your business, right? In that sense, things that happen inside the home, your own privacy, They say in Urdu, in madrasa, so many times we would hear this maxim when studying fiqh. Miyan bivi razi kya karega qazi. If the husband and wife are happy with each other, then the judge doesn't even have a case to adjudicate on. He probably has a wonderful and brilliant opinion he wants to give. They don't give a damn because they're happy. They're living the way they are. Nobody else knows about it. There's no complaint. How many people steal from one another in the history of Islam, stole from one another, and they worked it out amongst themselves? How many laws were broken, but the parties agreed, they worked it out amongst themselves, even if the government knew that it happened, because nobody raised a complaint. It's not a problem anymore, right? But things that have to do with the common good, the government does have a right to intervene in order to make a solution for that. The problem is that here in America, the government is so beholden to the donor class that, generally speaking, the regular people cannot get a fair shake. So you have one guy like Thomas Massey or Dennis Kucinich or whatever type person who at least claims in public to not take big money and seems to be less on the big money than anyone else. And then you'll have all these other guys who are just all at the APAC banquet, and even though every single post that they put up online is people saying a certain consonant of the alphabet U, and why don't you go to Israel, and why don't you this? But it doesn't matter, because the donor class is the one that helps them win the elections, and it's easier to buy an election than it is to actually bring voters to the polling station when it comes to an election. And that's the system over here. And look, democracy is not evil, it's not haram, but it's also not the big magic utopian virtue that everybody tries to make it out to be. One argument to having something like a totalitarian, I don't want to say totalitarian because that means something else, but having a government that is not so beholden to so many checks and balances is that they can then react swiftly to these types of things. That the person who wields the authority in the government, I don't want to say sovereign, because the sovereign of every Islamic state is Allah. Allah is the ruler of the caliphate. The word Khalifa itself means that you're like a deputy that is a steward on behalf of the actual ruler. In al-hukmu illa lillah. But the idea is that executor, that's the Khalifa, who is like a steward or executor on behalf of Allah Ta'ala, that there should be someone that doesn't have many checks on his authority. What are the checks on his authority? He can't commit kufr openly. He can't abandon the prayer. And then in an absolute sense, as long as he doesn't do that, you cannot challenge his position. And then afterward, he can't do anything haram. That's bil-ittifaq haram, which are limited checks on his authority. So someone say, well, this is going to result in tyranny. It didn't result in tyranny all of the time, and much of the time it didn't result in tyranny. And the argument in its favor is that when for example, your government is hostage to a banker class, or to a particular interest, or to a class of criminals, as happens in in other countries, like in countries in Africa and countries in Central America, South America. This has happened drug gangs and things like that. What is El Salvador, right? I don't know much about it from the inside, so please don't crucify me. But what is reported by a section of people is that the whole country was basically overridden by gangs, and then this Arab guy, mashallah, brought a little bit of the Ba'ath party to Ba'ath party to Central America, and basically strong-armed all the criminal gangs into submission, basically. And that's not possible when it's difficult for an executive branch to implement things like this. Obviously, there are problems on the other hand as well, because a lot of authority from a bad person can be wielded improperly. But they're different models. And each one has an upside and a downside. Ultimately, the parameters that the Sharia operates within are superior to the ones that don't operate with those parameters. Someone says, if they're so superior, then how come you guys got your backside handed to you on a plate and your whole countries were colonized? I say it's precisely because people abandoned those models of doing things. The Ottoman Empire is more the successor state in terms of its practical operations. It's more the successor state of the Roman Empire than it is of the Khilafah Rashida even though I personally say that their claim to the Khilafah was legitimate. But there are aspects of it that were, whereas Ahmed is not here, he's in the, oh, there you are. So now he's going to like make takfir of me because I just said something bad about the Dawlat Aliyah. In general, I have positive things to say, but there are certain parts of the way the system ran that are weird, right? Like nobody could own land in the Ottoman Empire. Everyone basically leased the land from the Sultan. And from the old part of the state, you could own land, but they basically aggressively tried to like take all of the land that was in full ownership and like buy it back or somehow repossess it. It was an interesting system that's not all necessarily completely in line with what the way ruled by the hukum of Allah Ta'ala was interpreted by the other states of Islamic history. The point being that if you have somebody who can do those things, then your government has like a champion that can protect it from when things go wrong. This is one of the things actually about the presidential system in America that's, I think, is superior to the way that the kind of highest post of government in much of in England, Canada, continental Europe is that they have a figurehead that is يقوم من يقوم مقام الرئيس, but he's just a figurehead, right? Like the Governor General in Canada, or the King in England, whereas the Prime Minister is the one who is the head of state, as it were. But he has completely gutted powers. He can't do like a lot of the wacky and weird stuff that the American president can do. And I think that's one of the reasons that America has been able to be more agile and like make more powerful decisions in on the world stage. Not all of which were for the good, a lot of which were not for the good. But they're still able to do what they wanted to. No one can fault them for not being able to prosecute their agenda at any rate. So stuff has to happen with regards to that, and the rights of the public. There has to be someone who stands up for them, and if you don't have someone like that, then weird stuff is going to happen. Barakallahu feekum. It's been a long time.